Welcome back to Track Talk. This is the semifinal game one of the 1830 tournament. And we are going to see a game between Tim Pelican, Ed Capitan. I think we were calling this guy King, and then Pyramidian. So let's just see what they get up to. Tim is going to lead us off and will be bidding on the CNA first off. Ed is going for the D&H, King, M&H. Pyramidian is going to go on the Champlain at St. Lawrence. So have to imagine Tim pulls here. Be kind of crazy not to. It's not terrible for King. He gets a pretty darn good private for near face as well, but very bad for Pyramidian and probably not great for Ed Capitan. Not terrible for him though, but definitely bad for Pyramidian because he's going to have the least revenue have to fall on the B&O and the Champlain at St. Lawrence. All right, Tim is going to pull, no surprises there, and everyone passes. Pyramidian ends up with the B&O, and we are into stock round one. So that's not the way you want the auction to go if you're anyone but Tim. He has priority, no less. Okay. And doesn't really matter that he has priority because he has enough money to float anyway. But we'll see what he does here. Looks like he will take the PRR. Pars it at 82. Not a huge fan of that. I think can par low. But I guess parring higher, if you have the ability, will allow you to maintain control of the PRR and still buy in the CNA for max. And the PRR does typically have decent map position throughout the game. All right. It's going to allow other people to probably get an earlier private buy-in than him, though. Yeah, especially if this B&O floats, it's pretty likely we're going to see a private buy-in in OR1. Okay. Ed is now up and will be taking the NYNH. And because Tim floated high, it allows the other players to float high and still operate behind him. So that's kind of the downside of this strategy, or one of the downsides, I would say. It does give you more liquidity as the PRR player, but it gives everyone else more liquidity as well with no downside. All right, King is going to be taking the CNO, pars it low. Pyramidian is passing, so it looks like even though they parred the B&O low, may not be floating. That's interesting. And actually, yeah, so I guess I should have done the math. Really doesn't have the cash to float it. So why not par it at 100 if you're gonna par it too high to float anyway? I don't know. Questioning some early game decisions from this player. Ed is still buying shares, and King is gonna backtrack and buy an NYNH. Okay. Tim is almost floated. Pyramidian is paying shares in the NYNH and paying share in the CNO as well. So two companies have floated. We'll see if the CNO goes back and floats. Looks like it does. And Pyramidian bought a third share of the B&O, but then put all of his cash in other players' companies. So going to be losing cash and still unable to float. Okay. I don't imagine this strategy is going to work out very well for him. Ed has a ton of cash left over since he got help floating and is just going to sit on it. Does he end up with priority? He does not. Okay. PRR is up, heading west. Not, I guess, in pressure to head towards Lancaster, but don't really see a reason to ever head Pittsburgh, even when you're not under pressure. So that's interesting. Buys a 2. NYNH is up, heading towards the NYC. Buys a 2. CNO heading towards Toledo. Buys a 2, and we're into stock round 2. Pyramidian doesn't have cash for shares, but could sell shares. Has lost $6 on each of the shares that he invested in. But I believe does have the capital to float regardless. He's going to pass. Ed is going to buy some paying shares now. And looks like he's just going to buy one share in each company and then give King priority. Okay. PRR is back up in stock round 2, or operating round 2. Heads towards Lancaster, runs for 30, pays it, buys another 2 train. And this is going to open up the privates for the other players. He is unable to buy in the CNA, no matter what he decides to do. NYNH is the NYC. Does he buy in his privates? This is Ed, and I think he was the M&H player? No, D&H. Okay. So not the highest buy-in, but still worth buying, I think, the two trains to bring it out. Um, Gonna pass CNO. He's got the M&H. That's almost as good as the CNA. So in terms of the buy-ins, I think you pretty heavily incentivized to buy the trains here. We'll see. Would he have the money to get the full buy-in? Um, so it's 160, 180, and then another 220. I think he would be shy, but he could get most of it. And he might just want to withhold here, get some yellow. Then with that capital, he can get 100% of the revenue by buying in his privates. I think that's the move. Buy the trains, withhold, and then get a rocket start to the beginning of the game. So he pays it and then buys another train. Okay. A lot of players are playing in ways that I don't agree with. Not that it's objectively wrong, just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Stock round 3. King is passing. Perinean is buying the PRR and sells it. So maybe interested in going back and floating now. Just going to trash everyone's shares. Looks like it. Not going to buy a B&O just yet, but we'll be doing that soon. And I think this just makes it even easier for everyone to get their privates in, right? Because now everybody's bought the twos and the B&O is going to float by the last two. So I think everybody's fine with this. Did he change operating order? I think he did. The PRR is now operating behind the NYNH. And I think before that was the opposite. So the CNA player is probably fine with this. Looks like he had more stuff to sell. So now the operating order is unchanged. Okay. Ed Capitan buys a cheap NYNH. And King is going to buy. So everybody's getting cheap shares now that Perimean is sold out. And he's going to go back and float. And I think that's all that's going to happen for the rest of the stock round. And we are into operating round 3. B&O should not be allowed easy access to Lancaster, but let's look at operating order here. 90, I think he is basically guaranteed to get access if he lays a sharp here. Yeah, he's going to operate ahead of the PRR basically no matter. Oh, actually, well, not necessarily. We only have one operating round here, so operating order could change during the stock round, which would be painful for the B&O. He's going to head straight across, so not even tempting fate. Going to just forfeit Lancaster, it looks like. Buys the 2, buys the 3. Does he buy the Champlain and St. Lawrence? He does. And not going to lay the track just yet. We're on to the PRR. PRR gets into Lancaster, has decent revenue with 2 trains now, tokens it, and should be buying in their private, as well as at least 1 3 train. I should say probably just 1 3 train. Buys the 3 and does not buy the private. Boy. All right. NYNH upgrades Albany and is going to token it. Does Ed have priority? Tim does. He's not going to have money to float. Ed, if he buys on his private, will be pretty close. He'll have to sell shares, but he should be able to pick up that NYC, which is going to be pretty good for him. Let's see if he buys his private. No. Okay. And then King, upgrading Toledo, tokens it. That's questionable. And is going to run for 130, pays it, buys the 3, and is the first player to buy in their privates. This is an odd start to the game. Not sure what to say about that. Tim is up and will buy a B&O, taking an $8 hit for that. Ed is going to join on the B&O. So B&O's revenue looking great here. Why is everybody prioritizing this? Not really, right? I suppose they're anticipating it get the Philadelphia upgrade, but it can't because the PRR controls that. Maybe that's why the PRR player didn't want to buy it in, because they wanted to control Philly, and they realized the B&O was probably going to be operating first. If that's the case, I question that, because it would be pretty easy to manipulate the operating order of the B&O to make sure it operates after the PRR. I mean, if you buy in the CNA, you have so much liquidity, you can really change operating order fairly easily. So I don't think that must be what's going on. Anyway, King is up and will buy B&O as well. Geez, there's a run on these shares. Perimean is going to buy the PRR. Everyone's passing. King buying B&O. That company's not floating up. Perimean passing. And now the B&O is trashed. So King has paid $8 for each of those shares and then hurt the share that he held even more. Doesn't look like he's setting up for a float. And just sits on a bunch of cash. Wow. This is operating round 4, PRR, 3 trains, and is going to buy in its private in 4.1, so misses out on some revenue there. Does get the Philly upgrade. That's helpful for the B&O as well. I mean, if you're going to do this, you almost hope that the B&O operates ahead of you so that they don't get to run into Philly. Tokens Philly, no guarantee that that gets anywhere useful. And it's going to run for 120, which he pays. NYNH upgrades New York. We were expecting Ed to get the NYC. It looks unlikely now. He's going third in priority because he wasn't able to get the DNH in last operating round. Okay, so based on how chaotic this game has been, I'd say it's basically anyone's game. I mean, it's just hard to predict what's going to happen. People have been missing opportunities right and left. So he's going to run for 110, pays it, B&O, heading down south. So he's going to be able to take advantage of his 3-train either direction, it looks like. Is he going to token in Philly just to run the 2 for a little bit more money? No. Okay. Running for 130, pays it, buys a 3, has a ton of trains, and is he gonna? He can't pick up the 4, but somebody should. Is the C&O incentivized to do that? No, it has two trains. So really not in a position to buy the 4. It doesn't have the cash for it anyways. It would have to withhold, and I don't think its revenues can be high enough to do that. Okay. C&O still not laying the number 2 track. So if you're Ed, you got to be looking and trying to race down to this Reading and Allentown, hoping you get lucky, I feel like. All right. Does have 3 runs. Going to run for 200 and pays it out. PRR. Upgrades Lancaster. That's also a company that could take advantage of the number 2 track and get access into New York North with that. Running for 140 is withholding. Okay. That's interesting. NYNH heading towards, making a beeline towards the Reading and Allentown track. Not sure about that. We did say that we were interested in them getting the number 2 track, but now that the PRR is upgraded here, should be able to get this before the NYNH player. And Tim is pretty early in priority. So if Tim gets the PRR and the NYC and is able to double token in Lancaster, that is problematic for the rest of the table. So I don't know about this track here. Especially if you have 2 trains. I feel like a gentle curve here and double tap in New York is strictly better. Yeah, this is questionable. He's going to buy the 4. Bad news for the C&O player who's going to be losing out on that revenue. B&O, less affected with 2-3 trains, doesn't really care all that much about the 2s resting. Upgrades its home, is going to have pretty good revenue here, 200 again. Pays it and is going to break the CPR suitcase. I believe he does have priority, and he's had decent payouts on this B&O, so his liquidity is not bad. He's able to float without too much difficulty as well. May see him snag that NYC. Be a little bit less powerful for him than it would for Tim, just because he doesn't have the synergy there. But NYC is good company, especially with guaranteed access to New York, so wouldn't hate to see that. C&O does lay the number 2. If your priority is now getting into Lancaster instead of New York, this 2 is a little bit less important. Just got to make sure you operate ahead of the C&O, which shouldn't be too difficult to secure that token in Lancaster. B&O could potentially get it. NYC could get it. So operating order in this next stock round is going to be very important. C&O pays 100, and we are into stock round 5. Everyone has a bunch of cash. Net worths are pretty close. Peridian is lagging just a little bit, but not dramatically so. Shares are relatively even as well. Priority here is very important, and operating order similarly very important. So, all right, Peridian is up and is going to sell. Looks like he's going to be floating. sells out of the B&O and takes the NYC. I think that's the move. Good news for him. Bad news for him is that both the B&O and the NYC want tokens in Lancaster, and they obviously both can't do it. Um, so the synergy is just not there. If he tried to leave it open, C&O would take it. I don't think it's going to be possible for him to double token Pittsburgh, at least not before the C&O gets down into Lancaster. Yeah. So the synergy's not there, but I still like the NYC float. It's still a good company. B&O is decent position, especially with the token in Lancaster. Although I keep saying this, the token in Philly makes the token in Lancaster a little less exciting. So yeah, I don't know. I still like the NYC float. I think it's much better than any of the other options. All right, Tim is up. He takes the Erie, max par. Ed going to take the B&M, also max par. Do both of these players have enough money to float these companies? No, but they probably will with sales of shares. So looks like we're going to be seeing a pretty explosive start to the train roster here. 3 new floats, potentially 4 with Ed, but probably not. If I'm Ed, I'm probably just sitting on paying shares here. Oh, sorry, not Ed. King. So he is selling out of his C&O quite heavily, and what that makes me think he is probably going to be a floating company. And he max pars the CPR. Okay, 3 max floats and then a 4th company at 76. These 4 trains are not going to be long on the market. I imagine we're going to be seeing the 5s come out pretty early here. So operating order between these 3 companies is going to be very, very important. And anytime you see this, a bunch of new companies floating, suitcase broken, pretty depleted treasuries in the stage 1 companies, you got to be worried about a bankruptcy. Net worths are pretty low here. Yeah, $1,000 is nice in the treasury, but if you need 2 permanent trains, $1,000 doesn't always cut it. Permidian is up. He's going to be floating. Tim selling C&O, presumably for his Erie shares. He's still a little bit short, it looks like. Sells out, now has the $400 he needs, and is going to work on buying at Erie. Ed is also short and buys a share, but it will have to sell pretty heavily, which is going to further hurt people's net worth, potentially tie shares up in the market, increasing the risk of bankruptcy. King is passing. When I see that and a ton of liquidity, I am assuming he's going to be hammering the net worth of at least these 2 companies, potentially the NYC as well, to try and win in a bankruptcy. Brendan is buying the NYC, still working on floating. Tim, Erie, Ed, passing. Okay. So is he just going to sit on 30% of the B&M? I suppose it's possible, but seems unlikely. Probably just waiting for these other companies, other players to tie up their liquidity. Brendan almost floated. Tim also floated, also almost floated. Ed not doing anything. King sitting on cash. Okay, Peridian is going to sidestep and do some trashing, it looks like, for a little bit. Cuts the NYNH. Tim passing. Ed passing. King is going to start working on the CPR. Maybe just getting bored, realize he has enough liquidity to hurt everyone, doesn't have to just pass for everyone to take their actions. Peridian is going to pass. I think there's a game of chicken going on here. Some 4-dimensional chess. These players are a little bit scared about all the liquidity that King has. Maybe they recognize the danger of all these companies floating and pushing to bankruptcy. However, I mean, you're kind of committed when you own 50%, you've invested half of your net worth into a company that does nothing for you. So, just passing and running scared of the liquidity hammer that King has is really not a viable option for Tim in particular and a lot of these other players as well. But it looks like they're going to risk it. So King is floating and nobody else is doing anything. Okay. Tim is buying the NYNH from the market, presumably to trash it again. Not quite yet. So the first company to float is actually the CPR, which is the last company to par. I think this is a game of chicken. I think people are trying to get fancy here, manipulate operating order. So King is going to sell out of the B&O, push that later in operating, and maintain some liquidity to hurt other people if he wants. He could also just force him to float if he's confident that he's going to win in a bankruptcy. Prydian is buying cheap CNO, maybe going to try and steal that presidency. I think that's very risky. We've been already alluding to the fact that we're anticipating, or at least at high risk of a bankruptcy here. Taking over another presidency here is not safe to do. He did buy it from the IPO, so maybe he's just going to try and trash it and get the $3 extra. No reason to trash it. It's already ledged, but $3, I suppose, in a tight game could be the difference between winning and losing. Looks like Tim is passing, Ed is passing, King is going to float the other players' companies and then presumably trash them. So now he's floated 2 players' companies, but isn't consolidating all of his cash. It's going to leave Ed unfloated. This is a very, very weird game. I've said that a couple of times. I don't want to belabor the point, but this is so strange. I don't know what's going on here. So NYC does get trashed, but if you're going to do this, why not max trash? Like, why not throw the NYC all the way down to 67? He couldn't do it because he put his cash in the Erie. Now I kind of expect him to buy another share of the Erie and double trash that, but he doesn't. Okay. So I guess he's just trying to change operating order, like very subtly. I have to assume there's a rationale here. I don't think it's random, but I don't see it. It seems like he could have done a lot more trashing than he did. Selling his own CPR to still operate behind the Erie. I think that's reasonable. You want the Erie to buy those 4s. Now he's going to work on floating the B&M. Might even steal that presidency from Ed. I mean, this part at least is smart, right? If Ed defends, he's going to give King priority, so you might as well pressure him. The danger here is that this will potentially force King to leave like $300 of cash invested in the B&M as opposed to other shares. Because if he sells out, then Ed doesn't give him priority anymore. All right, 30-30 split. Ed has one chance to defend and is going to pass. This is wild. All right. So King sells the PR and steals the B&M. Sure, why not? So now King has quite a bit of flexibility here. Can't suitcase either the B&M or the CPR, but between 3 companies, he can really determine when the 5s break. He's just got a lot of flexibility. He can shuffle around this 3 train and buy all the 5s in a CNO, whatever he wants to do. So it's going to be very hard for the other players to play around this train rush now that he has, $2,000 liquidity in treasuries and 3 places to, insert himself in the train rush, so to speak, as a result of his domination of this operating order. Selling out of the NYH and going to pass. So very strange game, very strange stock round. B&M is first up, and we'll see what he wants to do. I think if I'm in his shoes, I buy probably 2 4s here. And that allows Tim to buy the last 4 in the first 5. Then you can pick up 2 5s in your CPR, and you have $400 left over in the B&M to buy your 3rd permanent train. And then just run all 3 of your companies. Maybe you try to keep the CNO brown and just run away with this game on share density. And just hope that nobody bankrupts. Is anybody in a position to bankrupt if that were to occur? So we're saying 4-4, 5-5, 4-5, and then who brings out the 6? I suppose NYC brings out the 6, but he's really not incentivized to do that because then he would rust both of his own 3s. So we might see a little stall in that scenario. Ed would be the big loser there. I think he would probably be the one to bankrupt. Yeah. Okay. However, if Ed is the one that bankrupts, it's going to really hurt King's net worth because he's going to trash this 3 times. So that may be a reason that King doesn't want to press for a bankruptcy because he might not win. Net worth is pretty close between him and Tim Pelican, for instance. All right, well, this is one, if you were playing, you just have to master mode it and just see exactly how the math works out. All right, B&M's up. Is not going to head to Providence. Okay. Instead, laying the $120 track. Needs to be a little bit careful with cash here, since we are anticipating trains going pretty quickly. Buys the 3. Just going to buy one of them. Okay. Erie is leaving his options open. Could head towards Hamilton. Could head to Rochester. Could just try and suitcase. Will be broken eventually. I think we can anticipate that, but sometimes a little bit of a delay is all you need to survive a train rush. Buys the 3 out of the PRR, and the PRR, I believe, only had one train. Yes, so he's going to lose the run there. That is painful, but he leaves himself permanent train money in the company and doesn't look like he's going to leave himself in a position to buy into the 5s. Didn't have enough cash to do that anyways, but all right, so not as explosive as a rush as we were expecting. CPR is making its way down south. Will be expensive to do that, so King is spending a lot of money on track. Buys a 4 and is going to stall on the Poison 4. Does have runs for both of his companies now. NYH gets the link up with Lancaster. That is good for, I suppose, Peridian. I don't know that it really helps. He was going to get that token on the B&O anyway. Okay, running 2 trains for 210 with holds. So looking a little more healthy here. We were commenting that he was in a little bit of a rough spot, but with some withholds might be able to rehabilitate himself. B&O is actually not heading towards Lancaster, so presumably going to be taking the Lancaster token with his other presidency, the NYC. And does he then token in Pittsburgh? He does, so maybe hoping that he'll be able to double token in Pittsburgh with both of his companies. If that were to occur, that would be pretty strong. I think it's risky, though. Well, no, I mean, if he tokens in Pittsburgh and then Albany is tokened out, there's really not anybody in a position to token both of his companies out of Lancaster. So that corridor would just remain open for him. Okay, we'll see. Runs for 200 again, pays it. And he has 90% of the revenue, so that's pretty strong. NYC upgrades Pittsburgh and tokens. Nice. That's pretty strong. I didn't predict that in advance, but or at least I didn't predict that during the stock round or last operating round. But that works out nicely for him. Okay, so we are seeing some synergy between the B&O and the NYC. You just got to look at Pittsburgh instead of Lancaster. Nice. Shuffling trains out of the B&O. B&O has 2 3 trains and got to run them before they did this, so this is much more efficient for him than what Tim Pelican was doing to shuffle money out of the PRR. Yeah, things are looking okay for Peridian. He had a real questionable start to the game, but other players' blunders have allowed him to get into a pretty decent map position. So, blocked, so potentially going to head up towards the double O's. Not a whole lot of other places that the C&O can head at this point. And, could have been in position to get into Pittsburgh much earlier, but all this kind of, detours in the West come back to bite them. So, we've talked about it on the channel before, but I think heading straight to Chicago is pretty much the optimal play for the C&O. I don't see much reason to do anything else. And it's because of this. I mean, you get your early revenue by going to Chicago, and then you're able to head east. If you wait too long, what are you going to do? You're just blocked for the rest of the game. So, running for 100, withholding, and I think it makes perfect sense to withhold here. Only has 20% of it going to his company or to his treasury, and he's presumably going to try and get into the yellow with the C&O and then buy those cheap shares. PRR trainless would have to buy the Poison 4 unless he wants to buy the 3 out of the Erie. Erie doesn't have runs yet, so we'll see if he suitcases this or not. But this is not working out for Tim Pelican, this train stall. Going to buy his Schuylkill and gets a run into New York South, a second run, presumably when Philly upgraded. He would have gotten that anyway. And this is great for basically everyone. So he's paying $120 bearing the cost, but the NYC likes that, the B&O likes that, the NYNH likes that. Everybody's happy about that, so he's helping everybody out. He's just a generous guy. PRR does buy the Poison 4, okay, and that's going to give a 5 train to the B&M, I assume. Yes, and also a 5 train to the CPR. So King still gets the 2 5 trains, but Tim lost runs um, by doing it. Okay. Bino's still set for 6 and presumably could just out of pocket the next 6. So we may see um, King with 2 5s and then 4s. Tim with a single 5, and then Peridian with both 6s. I think that favors King, right? He's going to be running 5 trains in 3 companies. Nobody's in a position to rust the 4s, so he should be in good shape. Just depends on what his runs are. I guess the danger for him is that his runs are going to be pretty poor. You know, B&M run is anemic, CPR is running like a single dit, and then Sino was blocked at Pittsburgh. So if he's not in a good position, I suppose Ed is in a decent. I don't know. I mean, he's not going to have any permanent trains. This is hard. I don't know. It's been a chaotic game. All right. B&M's up and is now going to lay Providence. Not sure why he didn't do that last time. If he had, he would have potentially been able to take advantage of this Lancaster track. That would have been a real wrinkle in things. Now, granted, if he had laid Providence, other players would have played differently. Maybe it blocked him, but still, what does this get him that Providence doesn't? All right. Runs for 70, picks up a 5, I'm sure. Yep. And in terms of brown track, we're just looking at Philly. That should give Peridian the upgrade on Philly. And oh wow, I didn't see this. PRR tokened in NYC. That is terrible. All right, so this is a wasted token. This is a wasted token. That's 2 wasted tokens from the PRR player. Wild. Now I'm saying wasted, but the way people are playing, you know that somebody else is going to token in New York South, so maybe it won't end up being a problem. Does the PRR have any tokens left? I forget how many tokens they start with. No, so he's not going to be able to token in Philly and cut runs. Not that he could do it anyways, because he already has a token there. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Erie does give himself a run and is going to run for 60, buys a 5. CPR should be picking up a 5 here and gets into the off board, runs for 80, pays it. All the 5s are gone. NYH withheld last time. I don't know. Does he want to withhold again here? I think he needs cash into the stock round or else he's screwed either way. The other players have, you know, double his revenue or double his liquidity already. He withheld once. I understand why he's withholding. I mean, he's not got a clear path to a permanent train, but I think you got to pay here just to buy shares in the stock round. You got to assume these C&O shares can be cheap. Pick up a bunch of those. Upgrades Albany instead of New York. Huh. I guess he's running 2 trains out of Albany, so that's a little bit more cash for him potentially. Probably not. It's probably the same because NY is going to go up to 80, so it's $20 either way. All right, runs for 230. And so far, nobody has blocked this B&M. So is King going to get lucky here and get a token in Lancaster? That would be pretty crazy. B&O. Okay, not doing anything. Also not upgrading Philly. Interesting. Running for 110 and pays it. C&O. Looking to eventually bypass Pittsburgh and pressure Lancaster, I suppose. It's going to be very expensive to do that. Running for 130, withholding. Still makes sense to withhold. Pretty close to yellow, makes it cheaper to buy the shares. And actually, the other thing I didn't mention is that the B&O didn't actually buy a 6. Okay. C&O is going to shuffle some trains, so the CPR is still got a permanent train and has close to or closer to 6 train money. C&O has a token. All right. PRR gets the upgrade in Philly. Should never have happened. Blocking the south run for the Baltimore player. I mean, everyone can still run this track. It doesn't really hurt, but this was a strange decision to me. I don't know what he was worried about, why he prioritized this over Philly. Runs for 190, pays it, and shuffles a train out of the Erie. Erie still has a train. Okay. NYC. Looks like he's going to buy a 6 on the NYC instead of with the B&O. Only able to do this because he bought the train out of the NYC. So even if he had bought the NYC or bought the 6 with the B&O, he would have lost the run on the NYC. Not sure what the rationale behind doing it this way is. He's fallen back on the NYC either way. And it just allows the other players to get runs on their 3 trains. Okay. Gonna upgrade Pittsburgh and buys the 6. All right. Did Ed pay or withhold? He withheld twice, so he is going to have less cash than everybody else in the stock round. But nobody has all that much cash. Meridian is going to buy an Erie. That's an interesting company to buy. Doesn't have a train. I suppose he's anticipating an emergency buying as 6, or alternatively, he's just hoping to change operating order by selling this down so that his own B&O can get the 6. He's going to have to sell it down twice, but if he does that, there's really no way that the Erie can contest for the 6. So I like that. I think that's what he's doing. Makes sense. Tim buying the B&M. 2 trains. Reasonable. Okay. Ed, probably the only share for him. He's going to buy a PRR. King buying his B&M. Again, 2 trains, reasonable. Just needs to be careful that he doesn't get trashed into oblivion and then someone bankrupts. Net worths are still very close. Meridian, 1 more share for him. He's going to buy the Erie and sell it. Yep. So bad news for Tim. He is going to be stuck buying a train against order for the PRR and then potentially, definitely on the hook for a D. Well played to Meridian there. Tim buying the NYC. Ed out of cash. King, only thing he can buy is a C&O. Probably should, and I would buy it from the IPO, which he does. Good. Very efficient use of money there. Meridian, PRR. Tim trashes the Erie. That's his own company. He realizes he's going to be buying trains against operating order, so puts it behind the PRR. That's pretty clever. He leaves it vulnerable, but I don't think anybody wants to take that company. He's going to be able to buy paying shares, and then he's able to run the PRR trains before buying them across. So well played. This is such a strange game. I think that these players are, showing that they know what's going on and are reading the game state, but then what was going on at the beginning of the game? That was very crazy. All right. Tim buying the B&M. That company's floating up. King passing. Meridian. CPR, less attractive of a company. Tim, plenty of cash left. Picking up an NYNH. This company's been withholding. Need to be a little bit careful about investing in that. And trashes it. Okay. Everyone's passing except for Tim. Looks like he's going to go around trashing companies a little bit. Not going to be trashing the B&O, but maybe just recognizes it's going to have good runs when it gets its 6 train in 6.2. And that leaves Ed with priority. King is up on the B&M. And how good is this revenue actually going to be? It's actually going to be great because he's going to get this upgrade, I think, and then Token and Lancaster. How did nobody block this? We talked about it. I wasn't expecting to actually see it. So King is in decent position. We were talking about how, the liability for him was going to be that he didn't have good runs, but now inexplicably he's got 1 and then potentially 2 NYC runs, depending on how this track upgrades. So I assume he's going to get a gentle curve here. What is that, like a 23? Yeah, 23. And then he can upgrade to this track here, and then he'll have 2 runs into New York because he'll have the token down here with Lancaster, can run into New York South, and then from Boston can run into New York North. All right, so he's solved his bad runs problem. Yep. And there's the token. That screws Peridian on the BNO and NYC. This is what I'm talking about. This is like a very, chaotic game. You see people making pretty good moves. We were complimenting Peridian on his manipulation of turn order and that kind of thing. And then he left Lancaster vulnerable. All right. So running for 280, very good. And I think that he still has some train liability because he has 3 companies. So is he going to be able to do some shenanigans and shuffle trains around to pick up a 6? I don't think so. I think the B&O is going to grab it before he can do anything. But still, he's got $400 towards a D train, and nobody is really in a position to bring it out. I suppose the NYNH is probably 2 withholds away, so maybe they could do it. All right. CPR heading down south, maybe looking to link up with the Boston track. Not sure. Runs for 80, pays it. B&O trainless is heading up towards the double O's and still has 1 token left, but is not going to have token money for a while after it picks up its 6, presumably. He also has to sell shares to do this, so that's painful. Sells the CPR, that's not really worth much, so that's fine. Sells the NYC, also probably not a great company now that its runs have been cut. And buys the 6, so his train liability is satisfied. Tim, 2 trains on the PRR, and actually does have good runs because of the B&O player letting him get this Philadelphia upgrade. So he's able to double tap New York and then run through Lancaster. He's fine. Gonna run for 380 and withholds. He still needs a permanent train on the Erie. And with that withhold, how close is he to the upgrade? He is not that close. But if he shuffles the 5 into the Erie, puts all the cash into the PRR, he'll be much closer that way. So maybe 1 withhold on the PRR in the next operating round will get him there. It's possible. NYNH linking up with Boston and is going to run for 160. He's been withholding a lot, has some market shares now, maybe wants to consider paying. He does, okay. I think it would have made more sense to pay last time before the stock round and then withhold this time, but all right. CNO, maybe heading towards those double O's as well. And another player that we may be seeing withhold, not so much because he needs the cash, but more because he could be yellow. And does King have priority? He does not, but he's pretty early in priority, so he could pick up at least one of these shares if it was to get yellow. And there's a chance that the players would mess up and let him get 2 of them. He's going to withhold. Erie. Not sure where he's heading. Probably going to try and get into this track here. If you're the PRR or the B&M, you need to lay some tragic track here to block this. Not going to be. He's going to be falling back, not running any trains, and is going to shuffle a train out of the PRR, presumably. Yes, he does. So puts all the cash into the PRR and actually contributes president's funds to this. I think I always forget you can do this. It seems kind of weird that the rules allow this, that you can put extra cash in there because now he does have upgrade money on the PRR, which is bad news for Ed. So that's a little bit of a edge case in the rule book. NYC linking up with the double O's, doesn't have cash for the token and just going to pay it. B&M, probably just helping out his friend on the CPR here. Doesn't really need that track, so he's just living large with these 2 trains. Probably the last time he's going to have the double run. I don't think he withholds here. We'll see. Pays 350, good. CPR is heading down to Providence, and that would be a way to get him potentially into New York. Again, if Providence upgrades and this gets that track we highlighted before, then the CPR would also have a run into New York. Reasonable. Providence is guaranteed to upgrade and get the CPR in. The question is this track here. B&O upgrading the double O. The Erie player is going to thank him for that, but this does not allow him to get the token. CNO may be the player to secure that. Runs for 200, pays it. NYNH upgrading Boston for cash, but is not going to be able to get the upgrade. So we'll be out of pocketing a fair amount here, 600 some dollar or $561 it looks like, for the D train in 6.3. He's the only player with one presidency, so he's going to be forced to do that. That's going to put him out of contention, I'm sure. PRR should be upgrading here, and the PRR run is pretty good actually. Is able to run from New York all the way up into Boston as it stands, and actually is going to be cooperating with the Erie player to get them into New York, it looks like. So players need to throw away this gentle upgrade, or block him at this track if they want to preserve their runs through New York. And I guess more importantly, just deny the runs to the Erie. Upgrade as expected, NYC. This is what the B&M player was hoping for. And as a result, why would the NYC player lay that? I don't see how that helps him. I suppose it opens up a run into Boston through New York. But he already had that with this track here. Not sure about that. Doesn't help his other company, the B&O. Yeah, all right. Runs for 210. Withholds. And why is he withholding? He already has all the trains he needs. I guess that's for token money. So is he going to token in New York to prevent people from running through there? I guess that hurts the PRR, but it doesn't really hurt the B&M since it's going to be running just a 5 train. Probably doesn't hurt the CPR either. And could the CPR get the token first? CPR of token money? It does. So I don't know about this withhold. Was he not going to be yellow if he didn't withhold? That's the other consideration. Yeah, so maybe he just wants to be yellow. He is approaching his cert limit. Still has plenty of room on it. All right, maybe that's the strategy. So going to withhold. C&O, trainless. Is going to, I guess, shuffle trains and then buy a D somewhere. He doesn't have cash, really, for it. I thought he had more cash in this. This is a pretty big problem for him. I think you just shuffle into the stock round and then let other people buy your D train. Yeah. Get the CPR decent run through Providence. Shuffle the train between your B&M and your C&O since this is a split presidency, and then buy the D train in the next set of operating rounds. I think that's how I would do that. Hopefully he doesn't just sell shares for the D train right here. So he's not concerned. He's going to spend more money and then presumably token here, and that will secure his late game runs on the C&O, but it is going to make it harder for him to afford his D train, which he still needs. Drops the token and is going to shuffle the company. And this is another example of a player contributing President cash in a train shuffle. This is not something that we routinely see, and this is the second time we've seen this in this game. Wow. I wonder if he had always planned to do that or if he got the inspiration from seeing another player do it. This is not something that I would be thinking about doing. It's just not something that is on my radar. So it's odd to see it twice. All right, Erie's up. Does have a permanent train, and nobody's blocked him here or on this track here, so it looks pretty good for his access into New York South. He gets the link up, is very reliant on this track here, and I believe there's 2 of these tiles. So unless someone's playing very heads up, they're not going to be able to do it. Yeah, there's 2. All right. Where could people throw those away? This is not the right orientation. So it would be a ton of track points to deny both of those brown upgrades. I don't think it's going to be possible. I suppose you could throw the other upgrade there to deny that. So that would be the gentle curve heading this way and then a gentle curve this way. That would be, I think, this track here, 45. So if you're one of the other players, you may want to put a 45 here to deny the Erie access. That would be more efficient in terms of track points than throwing away the other brown upgrade. Runs for 100, pays it, B&M. And if you're the B&M, you already got the track for your CPR that you were hoping for. You don't have to upgrade Providence for him. You could upgrade Boston or Providence just for revenue, but I would love to see him just upgrade this track to spite Tim Pelican. I think Tim is still in the running here. Uh, yeah, I mean, he's really not far behind at all. He's basically tied for the lead, assuming Ed is not going to bankrupt here. Um, so yeah, I think if you're the B&M, it would make a lot of sense to lay that track. Not going to do it. Upgrades Lancaster. All right. 230. CPR. Upgrades Providence, I'm sure. And is he going to get the token in New York? No. So I guess he is going to buy the shares or the train um, before the stock round. And I understand, I mean, it's always hard to decide what to do here, but $500, you're going to have to sell a bunch of shares if you buy it here. Maybe he just shuffles. That could be the case. But if he's going to shuffle, why not drop the token in New York and just start messing with people? I don't know. So he shuffles out of the B&M instead of the C&O. That's odd. I see. So he's going to dump the B&M. He's not going to be able to dump, though, because Ed is going to sell 3 shares before. Okay. Well, I think maybe he wants to threaten to dump the B&M so that other people sell out. But why do you want them to sell out of your company? You want this to stay high and ledged, or not ledged, but against the ceiling. I don't know. He buys the train out of the CPR as well. Is he trying to set up for like a 3-company dump? What's going on here? So both of these companies are unattractive as it stands. C&O is not going to be able to be left trainless, of course. Maybe he buys both of the trains into the CPR. It doesn't have the cash to do it. Or C&O. I don't know. We'll have to just, we're just spectators. We're going to have to just see what he decides to do. B&O also somehow is trainless. So Tim must have bought a train, sorry, not Tim, Brian must have bought a train in the NYC. He has 2 6s there. What is the story there? Was he just trying to give token money to the B&O? I don't know. If he was, it's too little too late. So B&O falls back, trainless. NYNH is going to be buying a D train here. No other option. Has to sell and is, I think, out of the game now. He has no cash into the stock round, is trailing in shares and trailing in net worth. NYNH D train is decent. Can run through Boston into New York and then down south here, but I don't think that's going to be enough to get him back into the game. Unfortunately, 1 presidency is just a tough position in 30. PRR gets the upgrade that we were talking about. Amazed nobody blocks that. I don't really think it's necessarily worth tokening here if you're the Erie. Like getting the run to Philly isn't all that useful. But the Erie needs to make sure that nobody tokens in Rochester. I don't think anybody's really in a position to do that. PRR's out of tokens and they're cooperating. B&M's out of tokens. NYC doesn't have access there yet. Okay. Runs for 370 with his D train. Pretty good. Erie. Not sure where he's going with that. He's going to run and does token in New York. So he's running for 210 and has 70% of that revenue. He may withhold here to try and get into yellow. He's not going to be able to do it. So he probably pays. Pays it. NYC. Okay. So the NYC run is starting to develop here. Going to be running from New York into Albany and then west through Pittsburgh. This is only made possible by Tim laying this track here, so I'm not sure what the rationale there was. I don't think that helps Tim. Okay. Going to token Rochester. That doesn't help Tim at all. That's a disaster. Okay. And that, again, only made possible because Tim laid this. So I don't know why he did that. Runs for 230, pays it. C&O trainless, and we'll see what King is getting up to here. We weren't really sure. C&O is pretty deep in yellow at this point, and he's going to sell shares. He's going to massively sell out of the B&M. All right. And he's able to dump it here. So it was a 3-company dump. Nice. Okay. Now this hurts him quite a bit as well. Why is he selling it intentionally, 1 share at a time? What's that about? So he does dump it. And I admit that I'm a little bit confused about what exactly is required here. I think because he sold shares, he's required to put that cash towards a train. I don't think he can just like sit on that money and then not buy the D. I think he can't buy the 5 across and not use the money he raised in his presidency share. But I don't see enough three company dumps to know it, uh, verbatim the rules. But it is odd that he sold them one at a time. That hurts his net worth a lot more than it otherwise should. Um, hmm. Very strange game. And he bankrupts. Okay. Uh, well, I I don't know what to say. I didn't expect this. I didn't review this game at all in advance, as probably apparent by my commentary. That's crazy. So we have an intentional bankruptcy. I don't think he was out of this game. I think he was fine. Uh, so why did he bankrupt? I don't know. Tim is loving it though. He just had his run cut by the NYC, and manages to walk away with a victory because his opponent just decided to flip the table. What a crazy game. Um, I don't know. I think there were glimmers of like high level play here, where players were recognizing the danger and manipulating turn order, but then there were just really like big unforced errors and blunders as well. So this game was all over the map. I don't know that the level of skill here is what I would have anticipated from a semifinal game. Presumably, all these players have played, a lot of 1830. They've all demonstrated that they can win 1830 by virtue of being in this game. But this is kind of what you would expect to see in just a random pickup game, not the second round of a large tournament. Okay, well, um, Tim takes it. I feel bad for Peridian and Ed. Not so much Ed. I think he was out, but Peridian was, developing runs. He was by no means eliminated here, and just loses because King gave up. Yeah. All right. Well, that is semifinal one. We have one semifinal left, and then we'll be into the grand final, which I'm very excited for. It's been months and months of doing this tournament. Um, so hopefully we will have a better game for the final than we did in this game. This game was a lot of fun to commentate just because it was so ridiculous, but not the not the high level skill demonstration that I was hoping for. Anyway, that's the commentary. Thanks for watching, and Track Talk will be back.